The workshop had been my father's sanctuary for 40 years. Every tool hung in its proper place, the pegboard shadow outlines matching perfectly to each hammer, each wrench, each level. He'd built that shop himself, back when Mom was still alive, back when I was learning how to hold a saw without cutting myself. It was supposed to be where we'd restore the '67 Mustang sitting in his garage, where we'd finally have time to work on projects together now that I'd retired from teaching. It was supposed to be the place where he'd stay sharp, stay active, stay himself. Instead, I arrived unannounced on a Tuesday afternoon to find the workshop door padlocked from the outside. My father was 68 years old, not ancient, not senile. 3 months ago, he'd beaten me at chess. 2 months ago, he'd helped my neighbor rebuild a deck, but my sister had insisted he needed help after that dizzy spell at the grocery store, just precautionary, she'd said. Just someone to check on him, help with medications, make sure he was eating properly. We'd hired Vanessa through a reputable agency. Her credentials checked out. She had 15 years of experience in elder care. She'd seemed perfect. I should have visited more. I should have called more. But teaching high school had consumed my life for 30 years. And even in retirement, I'd been busy with grandkids, with my own health issues, with 1,000 excuses that seemed so important at the time. My sister Emily handled most of Dad's care coordination. She lived closer, she said. She'd keep me updated, she said. The last time I'd spoken to Dad was 3 weeks ago. He'd sounded tired. Said he was sleeping a lot. Said Vanessa was taking good care of him. I'd meant to visit that weekend, but my grandson had a soccer tournament. I'd meant to visit the next weekend, but my wife had plans. I'd meant to call, but the days slipped away like they always do, until suddenly it's Tuesday afternoon and you're pulling into your father's driveway with groceries because you finally have a free day and you want to surprise him. The house looked normal from the outside. The lawn was mowed, the hedges trimmed. Dad's old pickup sat in the driveway. But something felt wrong the moment I stepped out of my car. I couldn't identify it at first, just this nagging sensation in my gut. The same feeling I used to get when a student was cheating, or when a lesson plan wasn't going to work. Maybe it was the silence. Dad always had music playing, classic rock drifting through open windows. Today, the house was silent as a tomb. I knocked on the front door. No answer. I rang the bell. Still nothing. I tried the knob locked. I walked around to the back, past the workshop with its new padlock, and found the kitchen door slightly ajar. "Dad?" I called out as I pushed the door open. "It's Michael. You home?" The kitchen was spotless. Too spotless. Dad was tidy, but this looked like a showroom. No coffee cup in the sink, no newspaper on the table, no pill organizer on the counter. The refrigerator hummed, and I opened it to find it mostly empty, some yogurt, wilted lettuce, expired milk. I frowned. Dad loved to cook. His fridge should have been packed with leftovers, ingredients for his famous chili, the good cheese he bought from the specialty market downtown. I set my grocery bags on the counter and moved deeper into the house. The living room was equally pristine. Dad's favorite recliner sat unused, the TV remote still in its charging dock. The bookshelf looked wrong, books arranged by size rather than the chaotic system Dad preferred. His reading glasses weren't on the side table where he always left them. "Dad?" I called again, louder this time. A thump came from upstairs. Then voices muffled, but definitely voices. Relief flooded through me. He was home, probably just napping, hadn't heard me come in. I headed for the stairs. That's when I heard the laughter. Not Dad's laugh. Young voices, multiple people, coming from the living room I'd just left. But I'd just been in the living room. It was empty. I turned around, confused, and that's when I noticed the basement door. It was cracked open, light spilling up the stairs, and the voices were coming from down there. Not the living room, the basement. Dad hated the basement, said it was musty, said his knees couldn't handle the stairs anymore. He used it for storage, and nothing else. So why were people down there? I moved quietly to the door and peered down the wooden stairs. The basement had been transformed. Where boxes and old furniture should have been, I saw string lights, a sectional couch, a mini fridge, even a flat-screen TV mounted on the wall. 4 or 5 people in their 20s sat around a coffee table, drinking wine, laughing. One of them, a young woman with bright pink hair, was showing something on her phone to the others. "I'm telling you, this is the perfect crash pad," she was saying. "Vanessa said we could use it whenever she's working upstairs. The old guy doesn't even know we're here." My blood ran cold. "How much longer is she going to be?" a guy in a backwards cap asked. "I thought she said he'd sleep till at least 5. "She dosed him good this time," pink hair replied. "We've got hours." I must have made a sound, a gasp, a sharp intake of breath, because suddenly all eyes turned toward the stairs, toward me. For a frozen moment, we just stared at each other. Then I was moving, taking the stairs 2 at a time, my heart hammering against my ribs. Behind me, I heard scrambling, someone saying, "Oh shit, who is that?" I didn't stop to answer. I bolted back through the kitchen, heading for the stairs to the 2nd floor. If Dad was up there, if he was drugged like they said, I'd never moved so fast. The stairs seemed endless. I hit the landing and saw that Dad's bedroom door was closed. I twisted the knob. Locked. "Dad!" I pounded on the door. "Dad, it's Michael. Are you in there?" A moan, weak and confused, answered me. Then a woman's voice, sharp and startled. "What the who's out there?" I didn't answer. I stepped back and threw my shoulder against the door. The frame splintered but held. I hit it again, and this time the lock gave way. The door crashed open. The first thing I saw was my father. He was in bed, pale as death, his eyes half closed and unfocused. His wrists had red marks on them, and the room stank of unwashed sheets and something medicinal. The curtains were drawn, making the room dark as a cave in the middle of the afternoon. The second thing I saw was Vanessa, the nurse, standing by the bedside with a syringe in her hand. She recovered quickly. "I'll give her that." Her face shifted from shock to professional concern in a heartbeat. "Michael, what are you doing here? You can't just break into your father's room like this. Put down the syringe." My voice came out calmer than I felt. Years of handling classroom disruptions, of projecting authority even when I was terrified. Vanessa hesitated, her eyes calculating. "Your father needs his medication," she said, her tone soothing, practiced. "He's been very agitated today." The doctor prescribed. "Which doctor?" I stepped further into the room, positioning myself between her and Dad. "What medication?" "Dr. Morrison. Your sister approved it." She was already moving toward the door, trying to angle past me. "I really need to call Emily and explain." "Don't move." Something in my voice stopped her. Maybe it was the fact that I'd spent 30 years dealing with teenagers who thought they could lie their way out of anything. Maybe it was the cold rage that had settled over me when I saw my father's condition, when I heard those kids downstairs talking about him like he was a piece of furniture. "Who are those people in the basement?" I asked quietly. Her face went white. "I don't know what you're talking about." "Really?" "Because I just had a conversation with a girl with pink hair who said you told them they could use this place as a crash pad. Who said you dosed my father so he wouldn't know they were here." Vanessa's professional mask cracked. "You need to leave, now, or I'm calling the police." "Great idea. Let's call them together." I pulled out my phone. "I'm sure they'd love to hear about how you're drugging my father and running an Airbnb out of his house without his knowledge. I bet the rental platform would be interested too. And the state licensing board." She lunged for my phone. I'd been expecting it. I'd seen that same desperate grab from students trying to delete evidence of cheating. I stepped back, and she stumbled past me, her momentum carrying her toward the door. That's when I heard footsteps pounding up the stairs. The basement crew, I realized, coming to back up their host. But I wasn't alone either. The commotion had roused Dad. His eyes were opening, more focused now, and his voice weak, but unmistakably, his croaked out. "Michael? What's happening? Where am I?" Vanessa froze in the doorway. Behind her, 3 of the people from downstairs appeared, looking uncertain. They were young, probably college-aged, and clearly had no idea what they'd walked into. "Is this some kind of family thing?" one of them asked nervously. "Because Vanessa said—" "Shut up, Tyler," Vanessa snapped. "Who are you people?" Dad's voice was getting stronger. He was trying to sit up, confusion and fear warring on his face. "Michael, what's going on?" I kept my phone up, camera recording now. Stay calm, Dad. These people are leaving, aren't you? I looked at each of the young people in turn. Unless you want to be accessories to elder abuse. Your choice. They exchanged glances. Pink hair was already backing away. We didn't know, she said quickly. We just thought we were renting a room. We paid through the app. We didn't know anyone lived here. She said it was her place. Shut up, Vanessa shouted. All of you, get out. Actually, I said, nobody's going anywhere. Not until the police get here. I'd already dialed 911. The operator's voice came through the speaker. 911. What's your emergency? I need police at 2847 Oakmont Drive. I'm Michael Patterson. I've just found my father being held against his will by his caretaker, who has been drugging him and illegally renting out his home. There are multiple people here who may be involved. My father needs medical attention immediately. Vanessa bolted. I heard her feet hammering down the stairs, the front door slamming. 2 of the basement people followed her. But pink hair and one other guy, Tyler, apparently stayed, hands up, faces pale. We really didn't know, Tyler said again. We're just grad students. We've been staying here for 2 weeks. She said she owned the place, that she'd converted the basement into a rental. We paid her $3,000 for the month. The operator was asking me questions. I answered on autopilot while moving to Dad's side. He was more alert now, but his hands were shaking, and when I got close, I could smell that he'd wet himself. God knows how long he'd been lying there. How long have I been sleeping? He asked, his voice cracking. What day is it? It's Tuesday, Dad. October 24th. His eyes widened. October? But the last thing I remember is, it was September, early September. I was in the garden, and Vanessa brought me lemonade, and then he trailed off, horror dawning on his face. Michael, how long has it been? 6 weeks. 6 weeks, my father had been drugged in his own home, while strangers partied in his basement, and a woman we'd trusted to care for him had systematically stolen his life. 6 weeks while I'd been too busy, too distracted, too comfortable, believing everything was fine because Emily said so. The police arrived in 8 minutes. The paramedics came 3 minutes after that. What followed was a blur of questions, examinations, statements. The 2 grad students who'd stayed cooperated fully, showing officers their rental agreement through some app called Homestay. They'd paid Vanessa Morrison, she'd used her real name, incredibly through the platform. They had receipts, messages, everything. Dad's bedroom told its own story. The paramedics found 5 different prescription bottles, all filled within the past 6 weeks, all signed by someone named Dr. Marcus Chen. Diazepam, Ambien, Trazodone, even morphine, a cocktail designed to keep someone docile and sleeping. These prescriptions are fraudulent, one of the officers told me, as they bagged the bottles as evidence. Dr. Marcus Chen's medical license was revoked 2 years ago for prescription fraud. We've been looking for him. Let me guess, I said bitterly. He's Vanessa's boyfriend. The officer looked surprised. How did you know? Because I'd seen this pattern before. Not in my teaching career, but in the news. In support groups I joined after Mom died. In the horror stories shared by other children of aging parents. Caretaker abuse was more common than people wanted to admit. And it always followed the same script. Isolate the victim, establish dependency, then exploit them for money. The basement was thoroughly photographed. In addition to the living space, officers found evidence of a systematic operation. A locked file cabinet contained fake medical records, forged POA documents, and bank statements showing regular transfers from Dad's account to accounts in Vanessa's and Marcus Chen's names. Over $40,000 in 6 weeks. They'd also found Dad's workshop key in Vanessa's room. She'd been staying in the guest bedroom, we discovered. The padlock on the workshop wasn't to keep Dad safe. It was to keep him from accessing his tools, from having any sense of autonomy or purpose, to make him feel helpless. Dad was transported to the hospital for evaluation. I rode with him in the ambulance, holding his hand as he drifted in and out of consciousness. The drugs were still in his system. It would take days to fully clear them out, the paramedics said. And there might be lasting effects. Benzos in particular could cause memory issues, especially in older adults. My father might never fully remember those 6 lost weeks. At the hospital, while Dad was being examined, I called Emily. She answered on the 3rd ring, her voice cheerful. "Michael, how are you? I've been meaning to call. When was the last time you actually visited Dad?" Silence. Then, cautiously, I spoke to Vanessa last week. She said he was doing great. Why? What's wrong? When was the last time you saw him, Emily? In person? Another pause. It's been a few weeks. Maybe a month? I've been so busy with the kids' school schedules, and Vanessa said he was sleeping a lot, that he didn't want visitors. He didn't want visitors because Vanessa was drugging him unconscious and renting out his house to strangers. My voice shook. She's been doing it for 6 weeks, Em. 6 weeks he's been locked in his room, overdosed on medications prescribed by a fake doctor. 6 weeks while we both assumed everything was fine because we trusted someone we barely knew. Emily made a sound like she'd been punched. Oh my God. Oh my God, Michael. Is he okay? Where is he? Mercy General. They're running toxicology screens now. I took a breath, trying to calm down. The police are looking for Vanessa and her boyfriend. They want to talk to you too about how we hired her, what agency we used, what you knew. I didn't know anything. Emily's voice broke. I swear, Michael, I did background checks. I called references. The agency was legitimate. I made sure of it. How could this happen? That was the question, wasn't it? How could this happen? How could 2 educated, caring children let their father be abused under their noses? The answer was obvious and sickening. Because we'd been too trusting, too busy, too comfortable delegating his care to someone else. Because we'd treated him like a problem to be managed rather than a person who deserved our time and attention. The next several hours were a nightmare of police interviews, medical consultations, and phone calls to lawyers. The hospital social worker, a kind woman named Andrea, walked me through the immediate concerns. Dad would need to stay hospitalized for at least a few days while they monitored his recovery from the drugs. They'd also do a full physical and cognitive evaluation to assess any damage. We see cases like this more often than you'd think, Andrea told me gently. Elder abuse by caretakers, family members, even strangers who befriend isolated seniors. Your father is lucky you came when you did. Lucky. The word felt obscene. If I'd been lucky, I would have visited last week, last month. I would have noticed something was wrong during one of those brief phone calls where Dad sounded tired. I would have ignored my own busy life and made him a priority. But I couldn't change the past. I could only try to make things right now. The detective assigned to the case, Sarah Morales, met with me around 8 p.m. By then, I'd been at the hospital for 6 hours. Dad had been admitted for observation, and I'd been sitting in the waiting room, numb with exhaustion and guilt. We've got good news and bad news, Detective Morales said, sitting down across from me. Bad news first. Vanessa Morrison and Marcus Chen are in the wind. They cleared out of their apartment this afternoon. Neighbors saw them loading a U-Haul around 4 p.m. They knew I'd report them, I said dully. Probably. But here's the good news. They've done this before. Multiple times in multiple states. We've got open cases in Oregon, Nevada, and Arizona with the same MO. Elder care nurse moves in with a patient, gradually increases medications, isolates them from family, and exploits them financially. Usually, with the help of a partner posing as a doctor, the FBI has been tracking them for 2 years. 2 years? And they're still operating? They're smart. They move frequently, use different aliases, target victims carefully. But they made a mistake this time. She pulled out her phone and showed me a photo. Your father's house has a Ring camera on the front porch. Did you know that? I shook my head. I didn't even know he had Ring. Vanessa probably installed it to monitor visitors. But it's registered to your father's account, which means we have access to all the footage. We've got clear videos of Vanessa and Chen coming and going, of them loading your father's belongings into their car, of the Airbnb guests arriving. We've got timestamps, license plates, everything. She showed me clip after clip. Vanessa carrying garbage bags full of what looked like Dad's clothes out to a car, Chen helping her load a dolly stacked with boxes. The two of them laughing, actually laughing, as they worked. And then the parade of strangers. Young people arriving with suitcases, staying a few days, leaving. Different faces every few days. Dad's home turned into a revolving door of paying guests who had no idea they were partaking in a crime. We've already contacted Homestay, Detective Morales continued. Vanessa had a 5-star rating, 43 successful rentals in 6 weeks. At about $150 per night, she was pulling in nearly $7,000 a month just from the Airbnb operation, in addition to what she was stealing directly from your father's accounts. The audacity of it was staggering. She hadn't just been content to steal from a vulnerable man, she'd turned his home into a profit center. "Can you catch them?" I asked. "Oh, we'll catch them. With the FBI involved and all this evidence, they can't hide for long. And when we do, catch them." She smiled grimly. "They're looking at federal charges. Mail fraud, wire fraud, elder abuse, practicing medicine without a license, identity theft, tax evasion, the list goes on. We're talking 20 years minimum. 20 years. It should have made me feel better. It didn't, because 20 years wouldn't give Dad back those 6 weeks. 20 years wouldn't erase the trauma of being held prisoner in his own home. 20 years wouldn't fix whatever lasting damage the drugs had done to his mind and body. I stayed at the hospital that night. Emily arrived around midnight, her eyes red from crying. We sat in Dad's room, watching him sleep, real sleep this time, not drug-induced unconsciousness, and didn't talk much. What was there to say? We'd both failed him. We'd both put our busy lives ahead of his safety. The guilt was a living thing between us. Around 3 a.m., Dad stirred. His eyes opened, and for a moment he looked confused. Then he saw us, and his face crumpled. "I thought I was dreaming," he whispered. "I thought none of it was real. The workshop being locked, not being able to get out of bed, hearing voices downstairs, but no one would come when I called. I thought I was losing my mind." Emily took his hand. "Dad, I'm so sorry. I should have visited more. I should have." "We both should have," I cut in. "This is on both of us." Dad shook his head weakly. "It's on her. On them. Don't you dare blame yourselves for trusting someone who was supposed to be trustworthy." He coughed, and I helped him drink some water. "But Michael, I need you to promise me something." "Anything, Dad. Don't let me become invisible again." Even before all this, before Vanessa, I was starting to feel like I was fading away. You kids had your lives, your families. I understood, but I was lonely. That dizzy spell at the grocery store? I wasn't dizzy. I had a panic attack because I realized I'd gone 3 weeks without having a real conversation with anyone. So when Emily suggested hiring help, I said yes, because at least it would mean someone would be around. The words hit me like a physical blow. My father, who'd raised us alone after Mom died, who'd worked 2 jobs to put us through college, who'd always been strong and capable and independent, he'd been lonely. And instead of spending time with him, we'd hired someone to keep him company. We'd outsourced love. "I promise, Dad," I said, my voice breaking. "Never again. I'm moving back for a while. As long as you need me. Longer? I'll take a leave from work," Emily added. "We'll figure this out together. As a family." Dad nodded, his eyes closing again. But I saw the ghost of a smile on his face. Over the next few days, the story spiraled out. The police investigation revealed even more victims. The 2 grad students, Tyler and the girl with pink hair, led detectives to 3 other homestay rentals in the area, all houses belonging to elderly people, with live-in caretakers, all run by associates of Vanessa and Marcus. It was a network, a coordinated operation targeting vulnerable seniors across multiple cities. The media picked up the story. Local news first, then national. I gave several interviews, hoping publicity might help catch Vanessa and Marcus, might warn other families to be vigilant. The response was overwhelming. Hundreds of people reached out with similar stories, not exactly the same, but variations on the theme. A grandmother whose caretaker had been slowly stealing jewelry. A grandfather whose helper had isolated him from his children with lies and manipulation. An elderly aunt who'd signed over her house to a new friend she'd met at the senior center, only to be kicked out weeks later. Elder abuse was everywhere, once you knew to look for it. And I hadn't been looking. None of us had. Dad came home after 5 days. The hospital released him with a clean bill of health, physically, at least. The drugs had cleared his system without permanent damage. Cognitively, he was sharp. If anything, the ordeal had focused him, given him a mission. He wanted to help other families avoid what happened to him. The house was cleaned out by then. The police had collected all evidence. The basement had been emptied, the workshop unlocked. I'd changed all the locks, installed a proper security system, and set up cameras everywhere. Maybe it was overkill, but I wasn't taking chances. Emily and I moved in with him, along with our families. My wife Sarah was supportive. Her own father had died alone in a nursing home while she'd been traveling for work, and she'd carried that guilt for years. She understood why I needed to do this. Our grandkids thought it was an adventure, getting to live with Grandpa. They didn't understand the full story yet. We'd tell them when they were older. Emily's husband was less thrilled, but eventually came around when I pointed out that Dad's house was big enough for everyone and that we'd need to coordinate care anyway. Better to be under one roof. We established routines. Emily worked mornings, so she'd help Dad with breakfast and his exercises. I worked afternoons, overseeing his medications, real ones, prescribed by real doctors we'd personally vetted, and helping with dinner. Evenings were family time. We'd eat together, play cards, watch TV. The grandkids would do homework at the kitchen table while Dad helped them with math. Sarah would cook his favorite meals. Emily would read aloud from the newspaper, sparking debates about politics and current events. It wasn't perfect. Dad had nightmares sometimes, waking up convinced he was locked in his room again. He'd developed anxiety about taking pills, understandable, given what had happened. And there were days when the lingering effects of the drugs manifested in confusion or memory lapses. But overall, he was recovering. More importantly, he wasn't alone. Vanessa and Marcus were caught 3 weeks after I'd found Dad. They'd fled to California, thinking they could disappear into the Los Angeles sprawl. But the FBI had been monitoring their known aliases, and they'd made the mistake of using one to book a hotel. When agents raided their room, they found evidence linking them to 17 different victims across 6 states, with combined losses exceeding $500,000. The trial took months to prepare. Dad had to give a deposition, which was difficult for him, reliving the trauma, admitting to police and lawyers and prosecutors how helpless he'd felt. But he did it. He was strong in ways I was only beginning to appreciate. I attended every court date. Emily came to most of them. We wanted Vanessa and Marcus to see us, to know their victims weren't invisible, weren't forgotten. And we wanted Dad to see justice done. The prosecution was led by an assistant U.S. attorney named Jennifer Park. She was thorough, relentless, and genuinely angry on behalf of the victims. She built a case that was airtight. Financial records, medical records, testimony from victims and their families, evidence from the Ring cameras and homestay platform, even testimony from Tyler and Pink Hair, whose real name was Samantha, about what they'd witnessed. Marcus Chen testified that Vanessa had coerced him, that she'd threatened to expose his fraudulent medical practice unless he helped her. The jury didn't buy it. They saw him for what he was, a willing participant who'd exploited vulnerable people for profit. Vanessa didn't testify. Her lawyer argued she'd been manipulated by Marcus, that she'd believed the prescriptions were legitimate, that she genuinely thought she was helping her patients by keeping them calm and rested. The jury didn't buy that either. They saw the homestay account in her name. They saw the bank transfers. They saw the security footage of her laughing as she loaded Dad's belongings into her car. The verdict came on a cold day in March, nearly 5 months after I'd found Dad. Guilty on all counts. 47 counts in total, including elder abuse, fraud, practicing medicine without a license, identity theft, and conspiracy. Sentencing came 2 months later. The judge, a stern woman named Patricia Wong, who'd made her career prosecuting white-collar crime, didn't hold back. "What you did," she told Vanessa, "was not simply theft. You didn't just steal money. You stole time, dignity, and peace of mind from people who'd done nothing but trust you with their care. You took advantage of the most vulnerable members of our society for personal gain. You gaslit your victims and their families, making them doubt their own perceptions and worry about their loved ones' mental states. You showed no remorse, no empathy, no recognition of the harm you caused. Vanessa stood still, her face blank. The sentencing guidelines suggest 15 to 20 years. Judge Wong continued, I'm sentencing you to 25 years in federal prison with no possibility of parole before 20. Perhaps in that time, you'll develop the conscience you so clearly lack. Marcus got 20 years. The associates who'd run the other homestay scams got varying sentences, from 5 to 15 years, depending on their level of involvement. Samantha and Tyler weren't charged, they'd been victims themselves, unknowing accomplices who'd cooperated fully once they understood what was happening. Dad was in the courtroom when the sentences were read. He didn't cheer or cry or show much emotion at all. He just nodded once, slowly, and then stood to leave. Outside, on the courthouse steps, reporters clustered around us, asking for comments. Justice was served, Dad said simply. But this isn't really about punishment. It's about awareness. What happened to me happens to thousands of elderly Americans every year. We need better oversight, better training for caretakers, better support for families. We need to remember that aging doesn't make someone less valuable or less deserving of dignity and autonomy. The reporters scribbled notes. One asked if he'd been satisfied with the sentences. Nothing will give me back those 6 weeks, Dad said. Nothing will erase what they did. But knowing they can't do it to anyone else, that helps. We went home. Emily made spaghetti, Dad's favorite. The grandkids set the table. Sarah pulled out a cake she'd baked, chocolate with vanilla frosting, and we sang, For He's a Jolly Good Fellow, even though it wasn't anyone's birthday. It was just a celebration of justice, of family, of still being here. Later that night, after everyone else had gone to bed, Dad and I sat in his workshop. He'd started working on the Mustang again, taking it slow but making progress. The engine was torn down, parts spread across his workbench, each piece cleaned and inspected. It would take months, maybe years, to fully restore it. But we had time now. You know what the worst part was? Dad said suddenly, his hand stilling on a carburetor he'd been cleaning. I waited. It wasn't being drugged or being trapped in that room. It was thinking I deserved it. He looked up at me, his eyes wet. I kept thinking, I'm old, I'm useless, I'm just a burden. Maybe this is how it should be. Maybe I should just sleep and stay out of everyone's way. Dad, let me finish. He set down the carburetor. They made me believe I was the problem, that my wanting to use my own workshop, to live my own life, was me being difficult. Vanessa had a way of talking, very patient, very condescending, that made me feel like a child. And I started to believe it, started to think maybe I was losing it. Maybe I couldn't take care of myself anymore. He paused, gathering his thoughts. But I wasn't losing it. I was being deliberately confused, deliberately isolated, deliberately made helpless. And that's what I want people to understand. If you're elderly and you feel like something's wrong, trust that instinct. Don't let anyone make you doubt your own mind. And if you have elderly parents or relatives, visit them, talk to them, really see them. Because predators like Vanessa look for people who are alone, who are disconnected, who won't be missed if they disappear for a while. We sat in silence for a bit. Then Dad picked up the carburetor again and got back to work. I handed him tools, learning from him the same way I had as a kid. And in that moment, in that workshop filled with 40 years of memories and projects and patient teaching, I realized something important. My father wasn't a problem to be managed. He wasn't a task on my to-do list or a source of worry to be delegated to someone else. He was a person complex, capable, and deserving of his own autonomy. And yes, he might need help sometimes. We all need help sometimes, but help should empower, not imprison. Support should strengthen, not diminish. The Mustang restoration became our project. Every weekend, we'd work on it together. Emily would join sometimes, learning about engines and bodywork. The grandkids would watch, asking questions, soaking up knowledge from their grandfather. Neighbors would stop by, drawn by the sound of wrenches and the classic rock playing from Dad's old radio. Dad started a support group for elder abuse survivors. It met once a month in our living room, a circle of people who'd experienced similar betrayals and were working to rebuild their confidence and autonomy. Some had been financially exploited. Others had been physically or emotionally abused. All of them had been made to feel powerless by people who should have been helping them. The group grew. After 6 months, we had to move to a community center to fit everyone. Dad spoke at senior centers and care facilities, sharing his story and teaching people what to watch out for. He worked with legislators to strengthen elder abuse laws, to require better oversight of in-home caretakers, to create emergency response systems for isolated seniors. He found purpose again, not despite what happened to him, but because of it. He took his trauma and transformed it into something meaningful. As for me, I learned that retirement doesn't mean withdrawing from life. It means having time for what matters. And what matters isn't the busy work that had consumed me, the endless committees and social obligations and distractions I'd used to avoid difficult truths. What matters is this: a workshop filled with laughter and learning, a dinner table surrounded by family, a father who knows he's valued, protected, and loved, time spent together, not because of obligation or duty, but because we choose it, because we've learned too late, but not too late that this is the only time that matters. The Mustang is almost done now. Dad wants to take it to a car show next summer. He's got ideas for other projects too, a deck extension, a garden renovation, maybe restoring an old motorcycle he found at an estate sale. He's 68 years old, and he's planning for the future. Not because he has to prove he's not elderly or helpless or a burden, but because he's alive, because he's here, because we almost lost him, and we're never making that mistake again. The house still has all those security cameras. The locks are still changed. The workshop is never padlocked. And every evening, without fail, we eat dinner together, all of us, 3 generations, sharing food and stories and time. Because we learned something in that hospital room, in those court proceedings, in the months of healing that followed. We learned that the people you love most can hurt you deepest through neglect, through inattention, through the assumption that they'll always be there so you have time to visit later, to call tomorrow, to make them a priority. Eventually, we learned that eventually might never come. But we also learned that it's never too late to do better, to choose presence over convenience, to value people over productivity, to recognize that aging is not a disease to be managed, but a stage of life to be lived with dignity, purpose, and connection. Dad is planning a road trip for next fall. He wants to take the Mustang cross-country, visit all the national parks he's never seen. He's asked me to come with him. Emily's planning to meet us at various stops along the way with her family. We're talking about 2 months, maybe more. No rushing, no schedule, just the open road and time together. I've already said yes, because I've got nowhere more important to be than with my father, watching him drive the car we restored together, seeing the joy on his face as he steers toward whatever comes next. He's 68 years old, not elderly, not helpless, not a burden, just Dad, just living his life on his own terms, surrounded by people who love him and who he knows really knows, without doubt, will never let him disappear again. The story could end here, with justice served and lessons learned. But life doesn't end with neat resolutions. It keeps going, messier and more complicated than any story. There are still hard days. Dad still has nightmares. He still gets anxious about taking medication. He still flinches when strangers come to the door. The trauma didn't magically disappear with Vanessa's conviction. But he's healing. We all are. And in the healing, we've discovered something unexpected. Closeness. Real intimacy. The kind that comes not from blood relation, but from showing up, day after day, in the small moments that actually matter. That's what Vanessa stole, in the end. Not money, not time, not possessions. She stole the illusion that we could love from a distance, that care could be outsourced, that being family meant occasionally checking in rather than being truly present. And in taking that illusion away, In forcing us to confront our own failures and our own priorities, she inadvertently gave us something precious. The understanding that we'd been sleepwalking through the relationships that mattered most. We're awake now. And we're not going back to sleep.